It was the dead of winter, and his heater, it just quit. Rich Ingram, he was homeless, living in a tent beside a river in North Georgia. After about 6 weeks, well, he switched his mindset from surviving to thriving. Fast forward to today, Rich Ingram, he served our country. Matter of fact, while in Afghanistan, he would lose his arm, but that did not stop him. No, he would go on to compete in triathlons, continuing to do amazing things, pushing his body to the limit. And that wasn't enough. No, he actually went back into service as an amputee. This guy is remarkable. He exhibits what it means to have raw resilience. My friend, you are about to be pumped up, encouraged, and energized by my interview with Rich Ingram. This is episode 303.
Yo, are you ready to flip the script on life? Because those bad days, they're just doors to better days. And that's exactly what we do here at Grit, Grace, and Inspiration. Your host, Kevin Lowe, he's been flipping the script on his own life, turning over 20 years of being completely blind into straight up inspiration, motivation, and encouragement just for you. So, kick back, relax, and let me introduce you to your host, Kevin Lowe.
What is up, my friend? Welcome back to Grit, Grace, and Inspiration. Today, I am excited beyond belief to be in the studio with a guy who has the most insane story. Matter of fact, it's a bunch of stories, each one of them insane in their own way. But what's awesome is his personality. Rich Ingram, he's an awesome guy, here to motivate you to more or less get out there and take on this day, no matter what obstacles are standing in your way. Now, before you dive into all of that goodness, I do want to remind you that if you are somebody at a point in your life where you're wanting a little bit more, you want to be sure that you're making the most out of every day, every second you have, and you want to be sure that the rest of 2024 is a true success, well, this is your opportunity. I'm offering free coaching all summer long. All you have to do to sign up is text SUMMER 2024, all one word, no spaces, SUMMER 2024 to the phone number 33777. That is 33777, and you will get a link to my calendar to book that free session right away. Now, before I turn it over to Rich Ingram, I do just want to give you a heads up. If you are somebody listening to this podcast, maybe in your car, coming over the speakers, or maybe you got one of those Bluetooth speakers and it is being heard by everyone around you, if you have children with you, I do want you to understand that today's conversation does involve some adult content, especially around language. Yes, I'm talking about bad words that you probably don't want your kids to repeat. So I hope you'll keep listening because the story he has to share is incredible. But I just wanted to give you a heads up so you're not caught off guard that there is some colorful language used in today's interview. With that said, and that disclosure out of the way, I turn it over to the man of the hour, Rich Ingram.
Raw resilience is what, so first off, I needed like a framework to kind of brand what I was working on. And that's what I came up with. And the reason why is because first and foremost, before you do anything, you have to be true to yourself, not to sound cliche. But the first part of that framework is purpose, finding your purpose. Because, you know, in what I do, especially in endurance sports, purpose is the true motivator. When you're hitting a wall and literally think you have nothing left to give, purpose is what is going to make you keep going, not willpower or any of the other executive functions in your brain, but it's purpose, you know, the why. And in order to find that, you got to get raw, because too often we find ourselves in this culture that we're in, keeping up with the Joneses and we're not true to ourselves. And so when we really do a dive into who we are, taking stock of inventory of what we have, where we're at, and who we want to be, the only way that you can really get a good answer to that is by being true. And then, so that's the raw portion of it. But also it's raw because, man, I like to think of myself as just a one-layered individual, right? Maybe it's the military in me, but I don't like to beat around the bush. I like being direct. I think that what's the point in talking or speaking or saying anything if what's coming out of your mouth isn't true? And I think I can read through, bullshit pretty quick. So that's the raw portion. And then resilience is, the framework of how do we get there? How do we become resilience? Because perseverance and resilience are not the same thing. Like, dude, I'll tell you, I'm really good at taking some punches and persevering through some stuff, but resilience is coming out better on the other side, and doing something. Okay, it's great that you're getting up every time you get knocked down, but what are you doing about it to not get knocked down anymore, right? And so that's what raw resilience is, man. It's based off of purpose, mindset, and process.
I love it. So much more depth to that than I ever could have imagined. I love it, man. So now we have a little insight into this mindset that you have today. I'm curious to figure out how you even got here to this one-layered individual of cutting through the BS. Take me back to kind of growing up. I mean, where did you grow up? What was childhood like for you? Was it good? Was it bad? Was it something you care to forget? I would, just kind of love to hear that story.
Yeah. So I had a great childhood. Obviously there's a story there. We wouldn't be talking, but, I was raised in a pretty affluent family. My parents met a medical school in Birmingham, Alabama. My dad started his practice in a town called LaGrange, Georgia, right on the Alabama-Georgia border. But my dad, he was an outlier. And this is before that term really got popular, but he was gone when I woke up in the morning and gone when I went to bed at night. He worked 7 days a week. And as I started to get into adolescent years, I started to loathe him for it because I saw what all my other friends were doing with their fathers. They were taking them to football games or tailgates or whatever. Like, they drank beer, never saw my dad drinking. They took him hunting and fishing, and I didn't have access to any of that. And so as I got into my teenage years, one thing that I did have access to was booze, right? And so I became, because I had all this energy, like the energy of a supernova, but I just had no direction and no guidance. And so for me, and I call it chasing air, a great way to fit in or be put on a pedestal was, man, I would be a partier. And that's what I became known for, drinking and fighting, man. And that is not how I was raised. I mean, my dad, instead of buying me a baseball bat, I remember when I was like 7 years old, he bought me the Book of Virtues, and which is a great book for youngsters, but it was not. I mean, that kind of tells you a little bit about how he was. And I got into a lot of trouble. I was never into like drugs or anything like that. And no judgment to anybody that was. I just, wasn't. And so when it came time to go to college, my parents would only let me go to one school. They would not let me go to a university or anything like that because they were like, that's going to be a waste of time and you're going to get in trouble. So I went to one of 6 senior military colleges in the country. And the one that I went to is the one that no one's ever heard of. It's the University of North Georgia. And I started to get a little bit of a taste of the military at that point. And I really, that's where the seed was planted of the structure and the guidance. And the story there is I quit after the first semester. I called my dad and I was like, hey, I'm coming home. And he said, no, you're not. So I was like, I didn't really think that one through. I had a 1.7 GPA. And, I was majoring in physics and engineering. I was dual majoring, which you don't take a lot of those courses in the beginning, but we had to, I guess, because we would graduate with physics in 3 years and then engineering too. So nonetheless, I had a 1.7 GPA and little did I know, a lot of kids in the dual major program had a 1.7 GPA, but I was the one that quit. And I found myself living in a tent on a creek in the North Georgia mountains in the middle of the wintertime. It was so cold, my heater froze. I had a little like Coleman heater.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And man, after about 6 weeks, I can't even remember, but brushing my teeth in a creek and taking showers in gas station sinks, I was like, dude, what am I doing, man? And so I went to a National Guard recruiter and I signed up. They had a program where you could enlist and then become an officer in the active duty after you graduated. And so that's what I did. And I called my dad. I'm like, Dad, here's what I did. This is January, I think. I'd like to come home. And he let me, but he said, under conditions. And he said, you will read a book and write a book report every week. No television, no alcohol. You'll be in by 7 p.m. and you will work out and run every single day until you go to basic training in March. And he made me write out a plan. So a daily plan for the week. And at the end of every day, I had to write what I did. And he would initial next to it saying the plan was executed. Literally, he's that intense. And he would grade my book reports. A few weeks, like the first few weeks are tough because I was back home in a party scene and, I had some of my friends like, I can't go out, But after a while, like after a few weeks, I started loving it. I mean, I was reading way more than a book a week. And when I got to basic training, I realized without my dad ever telling me, to be successful, you have to become an outlier yourself and you have to sacrifice. And what he did for me for that, 2-month period or whatever it was invaluable. I mean, the lesson that he taught me and how he prepared me was just, and now my dad's one of my heroes. He could have done some things differently, right? But that was just his way. He didn't know anything else. And he was willing to let me sleep in a tent next to a creek for however long to learn that lesson. And I can't thank him enough for it.
Wow. Crazy story. I want to ask you, when you describe your dad as an outlier, talk to me about what that means.
So to me, I mean, statistically, it can be anything that's outside of our normal bell curve, but he was different. And the things that he did were not the norm. They weren't but he was revered or is revered in that town. He is known for, he will do anything for his patients. He is known for being an expert in his field. If he is not at work directly practicing medicine with patients, he's at home studying, looking at scholarly journals, making sure that he hones his craft and is up. And so to me, if we're talking about positive outliers, because there are negative outliers as well, that to me is being strong enough and courageous enough to stand up to the status quo in our society and our culture and do what is the right thing and what is going to take you to be successful. That to me is an outlier. And, a lot of people can say that, but actually, when you look at the real execution of what they're trying to do, we end up on Netflix or whatever else and not, it's just fluff. So, that's what my dad did not, he didn't come to games. He didn't come to, I loved baseball more than anything. He never came to a game, I don't think, ever. And so, but you get used to that, right? Like, again, I had a great job. My mom was at everything. And I knew that what my dad was doing was, he was providing for his family, but I do see a lot of him and me now. I'm a light switch, right? I'm either all in or I'm not at all.
Yeah.
and that was when I got out of the military the second time. That was one of the reasons I went into oil and gas, but that was why I left oil and gas, was because I was working so much. And when I got engaged, my wife was like, look, you can't be in a salary position working as much as you do. Like if you put the same amount of effort into sales or whatever it is, I mean, your revenue is just, going to quadruple. And so that's why I left oil and gas. But anyways, yeah, man, that's what kind of planted the seed with everything in
Yeah.
my rearing.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. 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 So powerful. So kind of going back to this story you were sharing, you're winding down on at-home boot camp before actual boot camp. And
Right.
and so talk to me about when you actually went away to boot camp. How old were you at that point?
20? No, I would have been 19. I was 19.
Okay. Okay. Wow. So we went from living by a creek in the middle of winter to going back home, being in a kind of makeshift boot camp. Now you're in boot camp. Talk to me about that experience, because from what I've seen about it on TV on the Discovery Channel, it sounds like pure hell. But I would
No, man.
love to hear it from you.
it to me, that was one of the most amazing experiences. And I don't know how many people told me when I said I was going to basic training that just blend in with everyone, don't volunteer for anything. I went the complete opposite route. I volunteered for everything. And because I was physically fit and I loved it. I already kind of knew a little bit about the military because of my North Georgia experience. Like I dipped my toes in the water and I knew that I loved it and I wanted the full experience. And so, coming from what I had just come from looking for direction and purpose in life to now completely being in this environment that I loved. Oh man, dude, I was all in. And I'll tell you, I guess they call it hazing now. I don't know what basic training is like now, but like we got smoked. I mean, every day they're dropping you for push-ups or whatever. And my goal was to never put my knees down during a push-up, to never miss any rep, and to just never quit on anything. And I did it, man. I never did. And we had the best platoons. Me and a couple other guys kind of banded together and we led that platoon. I mean, we were the only platoon that never had anyone go to sick call.
Wow.
Because we just kind of, made this environment where that was looked down upon. Like, you're being soft. You're going to miss out on training to go do what? You're going to let the team down to go do what? To go get Band-Aids. And so it was really shunned. And we created that. And look, man, we did some nasty stuff. One story, I had this kid, he was in the bunk. Now I say kid, he had to get like a waiver because he was so old. And I say old, I'm older than he is now, but he was like 34.
Okay.
And I think that's like the max age you can come in. But man, he just whined so much. And so one day we got done with a ruck march. This is in the infantry, we just walked everywhere. And he's like, oh my gosh, Ingram, 5 blisters on my feet. Count them, 5. So in the middle of the night, he, was asleep. I filled up both pairs because you get 2 pair of boots. I filled up both pair of boots with shaving cream. And of course he was whining. And I was like, well, next time you'll learn to complain about your feet. We were brutal, man. We were brutal. We were making some hard charging killers for sure.
Absolutely. Now, how long was basic training for?
Man, I think it was 14 weeks back then, maybe, but it was so in infantry, it's all the same. So it's like most people go to 9 weeks of basic training and then you have your, whatever your specialty training is. So ours was just advanced basic training. You did more maneuvering, like tactical ground maneuvering and weapons training, the remaining like 5 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever it was.
Okay. Now, when you joined the military, you're in basic training, like when was this? Like in comparison, like I'm thinking like 9/11 when things really heated up.
Yeah. So I think I signed up. I don't need to be honest with you, I don't even remember the exact time, but March of 2003 was when I went to basic training.
Okay.
So something like that.
You went in pretty much knowing that you would be deployed.
I think, because I remember being in North Georgia and one of my buddies, so September 11th happened and within 2 weeks, he was in the National Guard. He was in the reserves. So I'll tell you that. He was in the reserves and he got deployed to Afghanistan. I mean, like immediately. Yeah. And I want to say we declared war on Iraq in March of 2003, somewhere around there. So yeah, everybody knew. My drill sergeant, God, he was an amazing man and an amazing soldier. so loyal, but I mean, he was so angry because he was in a senior E7. He was up for E8, and he'd been in the 101st Airborne most of his career, and he had just gotten extended for his third year of, I don't know what the term would be, drill sergeancy, and then war was declared in the 101st gone, right? And he was so mad that he couldn't go back with his guys. Like he had trained, because that generation, they didn't really see anything, right? You had Panama and a couple other things, I guess, and I just remember admiring him so much for that. And so I picked him off quickly as just being a guy to emulate, and follow, and taught me a lot. And so I'm proud for that experience. But yeah, everybody knew they were gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So talk to me then about deploying overseas. Where did you go? Just talk to me about that the whole entire experience.
Yeah. So I was in the National Guard, Georgia National Guard, and we came down for orders sometime in 2004. So I went back to school after basic training, and we got orders. I don't know, but we reported to Fort Stewart to start training January 2005. And we had probably I think we ended up actually deploying to Iraq beginning of May. So we had about a 4-month train up leading to that. And we were in an area known as the Triangle of Death.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. And so it was named for its intense violence, right? So from the beginning of the war to around 2007, I think, after we had the huge push in Iraq. It's Yusufia, Mahmudia, and Lutafia area in the southwest of Baghdad, maybe 30 minutes. And so we call it, we say 30 clicks. So we were in a chicken coop in Mahmudia. That's what we had occupied. And it's funny because we only had like 2 females in the entire battalion. And one of them, we were driving back, and this is in like the first couple of weeks. We're driving back to our base, and we see just smoke everywhere. And we're calling. We're like, "Hey, what's up? Do you need assistance or like whatever?" They're like, "No, we're good." This female had somehow her hair straightener had burned down the chicken coop, and we're like, "This is why you don't have females," which I'm completely, I want everyone to know, I'm completely okay with females fighting for their country. That should have never been a thing. If a female, male, what in between, I don't care. You want to go fight for what you believe in and everybody else's freedom, man, I'll give you a weapon. But this particular one burnt down our base. So,
Wow.
Whatever. But yeah, man, I never got to live in the chicken coop anyways. That's where I think the battalion commander was in there and like his staff. So I was in a tent when we first got there, and we're in these tents that are made for like 8 people, and there were 14 of us in there. We were smushed in there like sardines, man. I don't remember what day it was, but it was like within the first week. We call it a FOB, a forward operating base. So it wasn't anything big, like what they have in the major cities, but we got shelled by mortars, and it's really hard to distinguish, especially when you first get there, the difference in the sounds of an incoming round and an outgoing round. But you can tell because as soon as you hear that sound, and what they do is they try and, let you know when they're going to be firing, like when they're going to be firing that day or whatever it is. So you kind of know. But when that first round hits, you see everybody look at each other with wide eyes, and all it takes is one guy to grab his stuff. And I mean, you clear out of there. And so first round hit, we ran to a bunker, it's just like this big upside down U, the concrete with sandbags all over it. Second round hits, and we just hear screams. And that's, I don't know if these guys, like a couple of these guys had on, because back then we had like DVD players, maybe they were listening to music. I don't know. But, one of the toughest things to do is to stay put in that bunker when you're hearing screaming. And because you could just be another casualty, right? So we waited there for the all clear. And as soon as we got the all clear, we knew my platoon's job was to go get these guys. We had the technology that would tell us where the rounds came from. And so everybody ran, picked up their gear, and we took off to our vehicles, jumping over the carnage from that round that hit that tent, 2 tents away from ours. Blood is on the ground, the canvas of the tent. One casualty was killed. And we run to our vehicles, we get in our Humvees, and we get to the location, and I hear Ingram take point. And this was like our first real deal, right? Without the other unit helping us and stuff. And so I had waited like my entire life for that moment, right? And it was exhilarating, and I can't describe the feelings, but we were in this open field. I'm the point man, and it's nothing but 18, 19, 21, 20-year-old guys, kids. Everybody falls in line after everything we had just seen. And now we're walking through this field wondering if we're going to take more fire, direct or indirect, step on a mine, get into a firefight, whatever it is. Everybody executed just exactly as we had trained. And I know what was going on in everyone's mind. No one had ever seen blood like we had just seen. Nobody had ever been in this situation up to this point of, hey, like I could literally die in the next 2 seconds. But we found these dudes. And now I don't know if they were the ones that did it or not, because they're pretty stupid to sit around that long. But I found some guys, and our first team, we laid it down what's called a support by fire position. And the team that's behind us came around, enveloped them, and then we created a security perimeter around these dudes, and we captured them and took them back. But the reason I tell that story is because it was a battle drill that had been rehearsed, not until it was gotten right, but it was rehearsed until we couldn't get it wrong. And from everything that we had just seen, in all that, whether it be anxiety or whatever other emotions were going on, thoughts in our heads, everyone executed that battle drill flawlessly. They were in the right positions at the right time. They knew how to move. And that gave my unit the validation that we needed to know that we were going to be okay in this deployment. It gave us the validation we needed to know that we could trust in our leaders to lead us to going back home. And it's no different in the civilian world, in how we can posture ourselves to live resilient lives, but we have to work at it, and we have to train what I call our battle drills to get there. But that was our first like few days in Iraq was, hey, welcome. And so, it was just kind of an indication of what was going to come. But it emboldened my love for soldiering. I had an amazing time. I volunteered for every single mission I could. And I loved it. I loved it.
Wow. Tell me, what is the difference, or if there even is a difference, between you were in the National Guard versus, say, somebody who's in the Army?
So, the National Guard, we were the first unit that was added. So Rumsfeld, back at that time, he started what is called an R4 Gen cycle. And so it's a cycle to where all the units, so let's say 82nd active duty unit. At the time, these units deploy in brigades. And so in the 82nd, okay, you're going to deploy 1 year, 12 months, you get 12 months back home. But then you're going to go again in 12 months. And so for multiple years, active duty Army was on a 12-month, basically a 2-year cycle. Well, during that time, Rumsfeld added the National Guard to that cycle to where it was every 4 years. And so what ended up happening so my brigade was the first one to kind of start that, but you still had some cherry guys in there, because up to that point, no one had really deployed before. But after that deployment that was in 2005, those guys, the same guys that I was with, they deployed again in 2009. So now you have a lot more experienced and just a lot more war veterans to, lead your people. But the National Guard, I mean, look, National Guard is tough, man, especially nowadays. I mean, my buddy's on his 4th deployment with the National Guard. Now, granted, it's not a combat deployment. I think they're in Kosovo, but, those guys, they're used to this life of being with their soldiers and everything in this environment. And then they go back home and they go back to work at the pharmacy, and
Yep.
it's completely different than, and look, don't get me wrong, the active duty has it difficult as well. And I'm not taking anything away from it because I've been on both sides. I was in active duty when I went back in as an officer, but with active duty, you're still with your same people, because you're in the Georgia National Guard and a lot of those people are around where you are, but they're not in your everyday lives. When you go back home in active duty, you're still in the everyday lives of all those people for the most part. Now, you do start to cycle out, but I won't get into that. So, but that's the main difference. That at the time, active duty was way more training than we were. That's why we had a 4-month train up before we left. And because apparently in the first Gulf War, whenever that was in the 90s, the 48th Brigade failed and did not deploy. So you have to go to the National Training Center and basically you get signed off on that, hey, you are ready to go to a combat zone. And the 48th Georgia National Guard Brigade went out to the National Training Center and they did not pass. They were that jacked up where they weren't even allowed to deploy.
Oh, man.
That's got to be pretty bad, man, because when you're at war, it's like, hey, give us bodies, dude. Oh, yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah,
wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. So thank you for kind of diving into that little, offshoot there just to clear up my confusion and to kind of make that all make sense. So, of course, there obviously came a point in your deployment when things didn't go right for you. And that's obviously a big part of our story today is kind of this pivot point. Will you walk me through that day?
Yeah. So we were on a 4-vehicle reconnaissance patrol. And so, we were a reconnaissance unit. So we were kind of the eyes and ears of the battalion. We would set up, we call them LPOPs, listening posts, observation posts, take a long gun like sniper rifle. And so we're just reporting back. So that's our main objective. So we also did presence patrols and stuff. So up to that point, as I said, I volunteered for I loved this. This was my jam. I was in my element. And so that day I was the rear gunner on a 4-vehicle Humvee patrol. So this was before we had the large mine resistant ambush protected vehicles. So, half the gunner's body is outside of the vehicle. And these are, not heavily protected vehicles. And so I had a 50 caliber machine gun. Man, so much firepower.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, it is. Oh my gosh. I have, anyways, I won't get into that. But, and so like every time I'm on the gun, man, I'm just, I'm thinking about what could go wrong, looking for gaps, whatever it may be, where things could happen, and I'm envisioning a fight, right? Like, hey, this is what I need to do here, there, what I'm going to do next if this happens, and then my vehicle hits a roadside bomb, and this entire deployment, I'm wanting these fights that are almost like validation and proof for me. Because you look at history and the fights that these guys, our fathers and grandfathers were in Vietnam and World War II. And I mean, just the sheer perseverance of them to continue going, like in Normandy, just under extreme conditions. And they won. And so I think part of that was what I wanted to prove to myself, that I want to be in that position. So the fact that I got hit by a roadside bomb is just not how I envisioned. And so when it happened, the Humvee was subsequently catapulted in the air and thrown into a roll. And I just remember dropping into the turret, or through the turret into the vehicle, trying to grab the radio mount, just saying, lights out, say a prayer. And because I knew I was going to die, because the gunners just don't generally survive that. And I all of a sudden realized I'm sitting on the ground, and I was awake through the whole thing. I got ejected out of the vehicle. I'm like, oh my God. But it was like surreal that I was still alive. And I look up and I see my driver now unconscious in the passenger seat of our Humvee. And I went to move towards him. And when I did that, I felt what I thought was just a break in my arm. And so I remember taking my right hand and feeling for the break, like I could cradle my arm, and my hand just hit nothing. And my stomach just turned. And I kept trying to hit my arm because I could feel my hand still, right? Because of the nerves. And my hand was just hitting nothing. And I looked down and it was just blood soaked uniform. And my forearm is laying on the ground, just hanging on by a piece of flesh no bigger than your pinky finger. So I'm back into this. I'm going to die. And I just remember saying, I am not fucking dying here.
Yeah.
And I picked my arm up and just started running with it over to the Humvee. And I'll just never forget that. But the driver, his name's Spottiswood, had just joined the unit. When he came to, his eyes just huge, and he kind of shuffled around and jumped out of the door. He got a tourniquet on me, and the medic came over, got an IV started. And, that kid, Spottiswood, saved my life. And, he knew exactly what to do. I mean, just, training set in. And golly. And I need to find him and, buy him a beer. I remember one of my good buddies, Paul Saylor, came over and held my hand because because again, this is a National Guard, right? Like you know all these people, like I went to college with Paul and we were good friends in college, and he held my hand because I was laying down, but I was staring up in the July sun. It's like July 20th, I think, is when this happened. It's like 115 degrees. I just didn't want to be staring at the sun. And he was thinking that I was going to pass out or whatever. And so he held my hand, and he held my hand the entire time until the medevac chopper came. And when they put me on the helicopter, he let go of my hand and he said, "You can be all right, man. I'll see you soon." And he was killed a month later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, that was the triangle of death. And that was how our deployment went down. But that was rough for a while. But I stabilized well, and I arrived in the States at Walter Reed in Washington, D.C., Walter Reed Hospital, like 2 days later. I mean, I think,
wow.
Yeah. So, if anybody's questioning the benefits of physical fitness, that's why the doctor said that I stabilized so well. Just my body was very fit. So,
yeah. Before we kind of continue, I would like to ask, were any of your other guys really hurt bad in that bomb also?
Yeah, my squad leader, such a great guy. His name is Joe Brown. He was also ejected out of the vehicle. So, he's in the front passenger seat. Again, I'm a soldier, so I can have a sick sense of humor. But it was almost comical because everyone's attention, well, I say everyone, like everybody, we had a security perimeter, right? But everyone that was around me was only focused on me. So our failure was that we should have done a head count. But I'm laying down by the back right tire, by the back passenger tire. And all of a sudden we hear somebody like as if their mouth was closed saying, "Would someone please get this Humvee off me?"
Oh, no.
So he had gotten ejected out of the vehicle, and then the vehicle landed on him. And his Kevlar helmet was holding up. I mean, his head would have gotten smashed had he not had that helmet on, but his helmet was like wedged between, I don't know, I'm not a mechanic, but like maybe the leaf springs or whatever of that back right wheel. And so he sustained, I think he broke his back, and there were some other, broke his jaw and some other things. But I would venture to say that his rehabilitation physically, I don't know about mentally, could have been worse than mine. And the reason is because it's your back, man. Like that's the center of everything, And so it's tough to lift things. It's tough to move your upper body, your lower body. And so that was really devastating for him. But so we both got on the medevac chopper and we were taken to Baghdad. And The first thing when I woke up being wheeled into a hospital room on a gurney. And that's when reality sank in. I looked over and I see my nub now wrapped in bandages. And I just closed my eyes and tried not to cry.
Yeah.
Because everything that I identified with, everything up to that point in my life was all taken away from me and came crashing down at once. Everything, it was like, I just spent my childhood figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. And I relied on that physical prowess to spend my life in a combat arms career. And that was just all gone. And the plus side of that story is that, and I don't tell this that often because it can take away from that moment. But about 10 seconds later, I look up and I see, because they have those little curtains where it's, in the hospital rooms where you can't see your neighbor.
Yeah.
They pulled the curtain back and it was Sergeant Brown. Joe Brown was next to me. And I mean, his eyes are on shut and I look at him and, here I am missing an arm and I got a couple other small bruises. But I look at him like, man, you look like shit. But he had broken his jaw and some other places in the face. So his mouth was wired shut. And he's like, don't make me laugh. And so, we sat there and kind of laughed at our current situations, but it didn't take away the fact of my mental position at the time.
No, of course. You have to, in my opinion, you have to find moments to laugh at stuff, because if not, man, this life can be way too hard.
Well, it's also like, what was I going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like I'm not a lizard. The arm's not growing back, so
yeah.
All right, this is new normal, right? And it took me a while to figure that out, but I think I was maybe in a little bit better spirits than a lot of people, because I do think that I was used to dealing with challenges, because I had put myself in challenges growing up, man. I was always like in trouble and then having to deal with whatever, confront my parents about got in a fight or whatever. Not advocating for someone to go that route, but I think there was just always something in me that gave me drive to, okay, all right, what's next? What's next? And I can say very truthfully and raw, I had never been one to just think dwell in the past ever. I thank God that, because I think we're all about chemical, the chemicals in our bodies make us feel and do certain things. They can't make us do things. They make us feel things. And so some people just might have to work at things more than other people because of, the way that they're made. And so I was fortunate enough where, I'm not like that, but I also had a great support network, which is just, I think Hollywood has kind of told us that, the hardest dudes, they're always out there isolated on an island by themselves. And that's horse shit. But that's kind of how I thought too. Like I thought that's what made you hard and doing things on your own and just, sucking it up. And it couldn't be further from the truth. Jesus, the world would be such a better place if everyone were open about, like what's going on with them. Again, like getting raw, like, there's no reason why someone is suffering so much from whatever it may be, childhood trauma, sexual abuse, whatever it is. I'm not saying like go air your laundry out on top of the courtyard, courthouse steps, but at the same time, like, dude, grab a friend, whatever you think they are going to shun you for or think differently about you for, if they are, man. But if we all just did a little more of that, oh my God, I mean, we would just be in such better emotional positions. So anyways, I'll get off that tangent, but my support group was just phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's amazing. How long did you end up being at Walter Reed?
Man, I am glad to say that at the time I was the quickest amputee to ever leave Walter Reed.
What?
Yeah. So pretty much. So when I first got there, when I arrived, my mom was there with my fly rod, my fly fishing rod. And that's not like a Zebco, right? Like it's not a one-handed job. And so, of course I just like shook it off. Like, what am I going to do with this thing? But that was another thing that I had identified with. There were often times where I would skip school for days. I mean, that's why I had a 1.7 GPA. And go fly fishing, right? I would just set up a tent out in the mountains, and I love being on a mountain trout stream. And that was really my mom's way of saying life doesn't have to change for you. And a few days later, my cousin Lawrence took me out to the front lawn of the hospital, and people probably thought I was escaping, dude. I was like, I was still attached to this IV tree with a wound vac and 3 tubes coming out of me, and I'm excited because I hadn't been outside, and so I'm like, well, I'm walking past. I'm like, yeah, let's get on this fly rod. Lawrence wanted to bring it out there and try the casting, and man, it wasn't long before I broke down and started crying because another thing that I identified with had been taken away, and I couldn't. And so Lawrence came over and he was like, look, we're going to keep at this. We're not going to leave until we can figure this out. And so, I just channeled all the frustration, all the anger, and I just kept at it, kept trying everything, tried to think of just outside of the box, forget the traditional way of doing this. Like what other tools do I have? And so I figured out that I could strip lime using my teeth. So I literally bite the line and pull it like really quick. And then I could manipulate the casts with 2 fingers and by releasing line. And man, like my view on everything changed at that moment from what am I going to do now to whatever it takes, I will keep moving forward. And so it wasn't long before I went online and I signed up for college classes back at University of North Georgia, starting in January. And I went to the doctor and I said, hey, doc, look, I signed up for classes in January. Do you think I'll be able to get out of here in December? And he was like, let's just get you healed first. All right. And I was like, no. Seriously. I paid for classes. He was like, look, if you leave here in December, you will be the quickest amputee to ever leave Walter Reed. And I looked at him and I was like, challenge accepted. and man, I'm gonna tell you, I put in the work. I was in that I was in that occupational therapy clinic every single day. I loved it. I would time myself. They'd have all these different things. So like once you get your prosthetic, you have all these different tasks to, let's say you have the hook. I don't know what it's called, but the body powered hook. And you have 2 boxes without lids on the top. And one of them has, 20 small cubes in it. And so you have to pick up all the cubes, one at a time and put them into the empty boxes right next to it. And so that was one of the biggest challenges. But what it does is it teaches you finesse and it just, muscle and stuff like that. And so I would time myself and how long it would take me and just try to really immerse myself in all the tools and resources that they had. And that's really how I did it. And it really started off with, I signed up for the Army 10 miler, which I believe was maybe beginning of October or something like that. And I didn't do too poorly, especially for a guy that, was rehabilitating from losing an arm. And a guy like the next week comes into the prosthetic lab and he's like, dude, you didn't do too bad on the Army 10 miler. Do you want to be on my triathlon team? And I agreed to do that. And that was really the pivotal moment in my life because I've been asked that question to be on this triathlon team. When I had 2 arms, I would have said no because I was in this fixed mindset of where I knew what I was good at and I wouldn't want anyone to see me fail or, in my mind to be knocked off a pedestal I thought other people had me on. And at this point, what did I have to lose? I was trying to reinvent myself. One thing that I knew I was good at and that I loved was physical fitness. Look, man, I'm not that smart, but if you just tell me to go, oh, dude, I'll go till I pass out, right? And so, but I hadn't swam real, competitively since middle school, which I quit. When I was in middle school, I was so bad everybody was always waiting for me at the end of the pool while I was still going. And I lied to myself by saying, these people will always be better than me. I will never be able to get there. So I didn't put in the work, and I took the easy route out, and I quit. And biking was something that you did to your buddy's house when you're 12, right? So, and so when I agreed to do that, these races started coming up. Well, I had to train for these races. And, I remember getting into the swimming pool, and I couldn't even make it the entire length with a freestyle stroke, without breaking into a breaststroke or dog paddling. And so I was right back where I was in middle school. But the difference at this point was that I never quit. I kept going, and I kept showing up every single day, no matter how hard it was, no matter how bad I wanted to just say, Dave, I can't do this. I kept showing up. And that's half the battle. And I'll tell you what, I never became a great swimmer. Never did. But the sport of triathlon and the camaraderie and the things that I learned taught me more about myself and where I wanted to go in life than anything else ever could have, especially in that moment. And so, cycling, it was the same. Everyone, when I started cycling, I was the guy that everyone waited on at the stop sign. And I was embarrassed because just several months ago, I was always one of the quickest at the 2 mile, right? The part of the PT test. I was always one of the best runners. I could bench press over 300 pounds. I was just a physical beast in that sense. And so it was embarrassing, but I kept showing up every single day. I kept asking people, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? I was very inquisitive. Anytime that, something bad happened, then I try and figure out how to change it. This is reality. This is what it is. And so I adopted a growth mindset without even knowing that I had done that. And so that's why I say that decision to join that triathlon team was a pivotal point in my life, because it made my perspective and how I operated change forever.
Yeah.
And so, just very fortunate that I was able to have that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to ask a really simple and kind of maybe stupid question. I understand running, cycling, and especially swimming. How do you do it with one arm?
Man, you figure it out. There's no one way to do it. That's everything. How do you brush your teeth with one hand?
Yeah.
Literally, but it's a blessing in disguise, because it makes me one of the best problem solvers in the world, because I am similar to you,
Of course.
How do you do certain things? Well, every single day you are faced with a different challenge of figuring something else out that everyone else living their normal, well, I don't want to call normal, I hate labeling things, but doing these simple daily living tasks, they're habitual, they're innate in them. And so, so to get off that tangent, I have an attachment. So I have a prosthetic, then I have an attachment that just kind of pops around the handlebars. And it's great for road cycling, and it's good for mountain biking as well. But you have to think, when they make all these prosthetic limbs, terminal devices is what we call them. Like that's, whether it be your hook or your push-up arm, whatever. They're just devices you pop in and out of that prosthetic. But when they're making those things, they're not thinking of guys like me. Because, and so, they'll say, oh yeah, you just use this one and it locks into your handlebar. Well, hold on a second. So you're telling me if I'm bombing down a mountain dirt bike and I'm still going to be connected to my bike? Like that sounds horrible. Yes. So I chose to go the route of, and I use this thing. So like for bench press, I try and use a Smith machine when I bench press. I do dumbbells as well, and I don't use this for dumbbells. But if I'm doing heavyweight, I have to use a Smith machine because my residual limb is only like 2 inches long. So the dumbbell would just fall on my face, which has happened. That's another way, how it is, how we figure it out. And that's true, man. You gotta be willing. You gotta be willing to put yourself in a position to do that. Anyways, this attachment is so funny, and I don't mountain bike as much anymore because I'm getting, I'm in my 40s now, And so back in my 20s and even in my early 30s, dude, there's not a mountain bike ride that we go on where I'm not wrecking,
Yeah.
you know, and just because like for me to bunny hop stuff or to like lift up the front wheel and do certain things, well, like that little device might pop off the handlebar. Well, then my front wheel doesn't come up. I'm slamming into something. I'm head over. I mean, I had to go to the hospital because I guess I take that back. A couple of years ago, I did bomb pretty bad. I had to be taken to the hospital. But anyway, so that's why I don't do it so much anymore. Swimming, dude, again, they're always coming out with these new techniques. And I say Challenge Athletes Foundation is pretty good at posting different like training videos for amputees to try. But what I do is I swim how any other person would swim freestyle. I throw my nub out there and I just go at it.
Awesome.
That's it, dude.
That is awesome. Okay. Talk to me now about your triathlon out in California. I know I want to hear that story because I know a brake cable broke, all the stuff. Talk to me about that because I feel like that was a pretty monumental triathlon.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was living in Georgia and we were doing a relay team in San Francisco, escape from Alcatraz. So we had a swimmer, a cyclist, and a runner. And I was a cyclist at that time. So we're out in San Francisco and the swim is just, and our swimmer is just so amazing. She did so well. But the boat takes you out to Alcatraz Island and you jump off the boat, swim across the bay, and then, she comes in and you're in the transition area. And so whoever's doing the leg before you, once they get into transition, you can take off. So once Melissa came in, it was my time to go. And I hop on my bike and right as I'm exiting the transition area, my brake cable snapped. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And I just remember looking at the volunteer at the transition exit and she's just like, what are you going to do? And I remember looking at her and I said, fuck it. And again, my 2 words, man. And my thoughts were, I have people counting on me. My swimmer just crushed the swim. The runner's not going to be able to go. Like, why did he fly out here if he can't run? I can't let them down. And I didn't come here to watch. So I took off and, I used as much as I could, my shoes to brake. And I ended up beating like 30 cyclists. Now, granted, these are 30 professional cyclists. These cyclists, those professionals, they were doing the entire race. All I was doing was the bike. But I say that had my brake cables not snapped, I would not have beaten 30 professional cyclists. And because what it did for me was it taught me so much about my abilities that I would have never learned had my brakes been operational. And so, I mean, it's a metaphor, right? Like, if we can figure out what is limiting us and try and remove those brakes, like, God, think about what we're capable of. Cause I mean, San Francisco, I'm sure everybody knows it's nothing but hills. So, I mean, literally I'm going extremely fast, turning at high speeds next to other people, which I'm not comfortable with one arm, finessing a bicycle between people. But I had to I had to do it. I didn't have a choice. And so I learned more about my cycling capabilities than I ever would have otherwise. And it threw me into just a different realm of cycling. And I mean, dude, so again, like that's just another worldview or perspective that I like to have on things. It's just like, okay, if I'm not achieving what I want right now, like what is holding me back? And it's usually yourself, whether you don't have the confidence or, afraid of the failure or whatever it is normally yourself. There's something that is in you that is limiting your performance. You just got to figure out what that is and say, all right, man, how do I get rid of this? And you got to work at it.
Yeah. Wow. I can't help but think it's like, I mean, I'll say it first off. I mean, I always hope things in life are going to go easy, always smooth sailing. But the fact is true, man. We don't build character. We don't become who we are when it's smooth sailing. It takes the brakes not working for you to realize another version of you, another layer to you of this pure, raw resilience grit to get through it. And, probably if you had thought about it, you'd be like, no way, there's no way I could do that. But you were faced with it and you did it, you crushed it, and you came out the other side growing more than you probably ever would had if the brake cable had worked.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest things is, what you're kind of talking about is transformation. And
Yes.
and people that want transformation have to do uncomfortable things.
Yes.
And that's how transformation works. The whole purpose behind basic training, one of the purposes behind basic training used to be, we're going to break the individual down and build them back up. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to make them uncomfortable. That's the whole point of basic training. That's kind of how we have to look at things. If anyone's looking for a lifestyle shift or some kind of change in performance, dude, you're going to have to get very uncomfortable, but you're going to have to figure out how to do it, in a controlled environment. But that's why cold showers are so amazing, right? Daily cold showers or whatever it is. And a good way to think about it, just to get in the mindset of being uncomfortable, is every time you're faced with a decision, so a personal decision, am I going to eat this or am I going to eat that? What do you not want to do? Do that. That's a good gauge of, like, okay, there's an open parking spot right in front of Schlotsky's. Do you park there or do you go park 10 spots away and walk? What do you want to watch TV or read a book? And it is difficult at first, but it does start to become innate.
Yes.
And, but I think that's one of the biggest things. And that's how we can start to learn to posture ourselves for resilience, is by doing those uncomfortable things. Because over and over again, what we're doing is we're kind of hardening ourselves to adversity. And we're starting to realize that these uncomfortable things are temporary, right? Like it's just, and that's one of my biggest things, is that, our pains and gains are equitable. All the pains that we are faced with, or whatever it is, they're just a part of the journey, dude. Like, okay, you get a big deal in yourself. Okay, that's fine. But guess what? That was a one-time thing. Get back to work. Because if you sit there and rest on your laurels, well, then you're in a hyper state still, the same way you're in a hyper state if you hadn't sold anything all month. You're just in a lower state that you got to pull yourself out of. So the higher you are, the larger you can fall. So we want to stay in that middle ground. And we do that by resiliently posturing, and we got to work at it. And it starts with discomfort.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. So I have no idea when this comes in the timeline of what we're talking about, but you would end up going back into the service for 3 more combat missions?
Yeah, 3. So 3 more tours. Yeah.
Talk to me about that. How did that even come about? I didn't even know, honestly, an amputee could go into the service.
Well, at the time, amputees had returned to their units, or if you were an amputee and you were enlisted, guys had gone back to enlisted units, or officers that were amputees went back to being an officer, but no one had ever lost their arm as an enlisted soldier and then commissioned as an amputee. So, commissioning is going back in as an officer. So I was the first. So again, it was like, figure it out. But I was competing in these triathlon events, and I started, wasn't that bad. And I was really good at cycling and running. But, I started competing against these able-bodied guys. I'm like, why can't I go back in? And so I was doing an internship with a state senator in Atlanta. I think it was in the 2007 session. And he asked me, he was like, what do you want to do after you're done with school? And so I said, sir, I'd really like to go back into the military. And next thing I know, I am with him sitting in front of, I'm not sure if it was Inspector General. I'm not, but it was a general on President Bush's staff.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And so we're in DC talking to him. General Kicklighter was his name. And he said, look, I want you to submit your commission pack as you normally would. If you can meet the standard, we're going to make this thing happen and we're going to follow the progress.
Wow.
So Roger that, sir. And so that got the wheels moving. I got back into ROTC because in North Georgia, the thing about that school, it's the largest ROTC program in the country. And a lot of people don't know that, but it's because, we're a senior military college. So the other senior military colleges, just for context, are the Citadel, VMI, Texas A&M, Norwich, but they all have all the other armed services branches. And so we only have Army. That's why we're the largest. But what that means is, as one of 6, we have a lot of federal resources, more resources that a normal, University of Texas ROTC is going to have. Once I got back into ROTC, I had the full backing of full bird colonels and sergeants major. It was just, I was so fortunate for that. And they had my back in it, but it was always known, like, you have to meet the standard to do this. So one thing that helped me was I was very physically fit. There is no way that they could say, you can't do this when I'm getting one of the highest PT scores in the whole school as an amputee, right?
Yeah.
And so I even remember at Ranger Challenge. The Ranger Challenge is like we call them like high speeds, but the high speed cadets. And so once a semester, you go out and you compete over 2 days with other schools, and on just normal, whether it's land navigation, weapons, physical fitness, all these different things. And we did our PT test the first day. And for that first day, I held the record with 134 push-ups in 2 minutes, and with one arm. And
wow.
So it's kind of like, okay, well, we can't not let them in because of the PT test. And so yeah, look, it wasn't all easy. There were times where, because I was retired, right? Like, I was receiving VA benefits. And so they didn't know what to do with that. They were like, well, if he goes back in, he can't continue getting VA benefits if he's on active duty. I want to be like, well, why not? But, I wasn't greedy. And so, but there were times where they're like, hey, look, Rich, we don't, this may not happen. We would love to keep you in the program, but we understand, if you want to get out, exit. And I just stuck with it. I was like, you know what? What else what have I got to lose? I was kind of having fun too. And so I just stuck it out. So, you commission the same day that you graduate on commencement, and all my family was in town, and I did not know if I was going to commission. So we commissioned Saturday morning and graduated Saturday morning. Friday night, I did not know if I was going to commission. And I get a phone call from my sergeant major, and he's like, all right, Rich, we finally got the final sign off on your paperwork. You are good to go. And, I was like, thank God, because I didn't tell anybody this wasn't happening. I was just going to play it off. What's funny about it is probably 2 weeks before that, I get a phone call from a buddy, and he was like, dude, why didn't you tell me that you were doing this? I'm aide de camp to the general that has to sign your final waiver. And that guy who called me, name was Dave Roselle. That's the same guy that asked me to be on his triathlon team.
Oh, wow.
And I like, every time I think about it, or say it, I get goosebumps, because it's like, wow. Talk about the stars being aligned there. And again, a lot of life is just luck and timing. And, so I was fortunate for that, and I was able to commission. And I always say I would have made a much better non-commissioned officer than an officer. And I still agree with that to this day, because I like being hands-on. I like being in the battle. And I don't know, like that. And there were certain things that I wanted to accomplish during my officership that, like I wanted to try and at least go to Delta selection to be a direct action operator, and, certain things in Ranger Battalion. And I just I never got the opportunity. And I'm not saying whatever, the military just wasn't ready. And you know what? Maybe I wasn't ready either. It just never materialized. And I think I started really having it started having a negative impact on me. And because I wanted to do that enlisted. Before I lost my arm, I was going to stay enlisted. That was my plan, was to go active duty, go to Ranger Battalion as an enlisted soldier. So who knows where I would be had that happen. But once I became an officer, I started chasing deployment, started chasing the fight, and it just wasn't materializing how I'd anticipated. I think it started to wear on me a pretty good bit. And, after my fourth deployment, when I got home, I had no reintegration, because normally you have a reintegrated process where, it's like, okay, you just went from like shooting your gun at anything that moved or whatever to now stopping at traffic lights. Right. And I didn't have that, and I don't know if it would have mattered, but, I got into a pretty brutal bar fight, and it was bad. I say the bar fight was bad. The cops were on my side, man. They were like, dude, just walk away. I was like, I just want to go back to the bar. They're like, look, man, we're not taking you in. We're telling you like everything is good. Just go to another bar. I turn around, like headbutted this cop.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And then, dude, I don't know where this like Hulk strength came from, but it took like 4 cops to hold me down. They put me in the back of the cop car. I busted out the back window with my hook, and I hear them saying like, we don't know how to handcuff. And and they're like, what do we do with that hook? And so again, fortunate that like all the charges got dropped. I went, talked to the officer, had some other people talk to the police officer, and I was just hammered drunk. But I think at that point I realized, I wasn't court-martialed or anything like that. I got a letter of reprimand, which that's whatever. But it just kind of made me realize like this is not what I want to do anymore. It's like, again, you got to be raw. You got to be true. Like, all right, man, I can either keep chasing this and it never materializes. Look, man, you just got to say, let's start something new and let's go figure out what else is out there for us. Right. And so that's what I did. And, once I got out, it was trial and error. Now I loved that oil and gas job, working for Kinder Morgan. I relished in it. Had I never met anyone, I'd probably still be there. Had I never started a family, just because I was able to work 14-hour days, right? It was one of those jobs that was similar to the military. Hey, you got pipeline break at, whatever it is in the middle of the night on a Saturday, like you got to go, you got to be there. And I loved that quick, atmosphere. But my wife was right, like, okay, now we got to start thinking about the other 3 mouths we have to feed. And so that's when, I started up my own insurance agency, and it did really well, man. It was very profitable, but I realized that I'd rather cut off my right hand than continue to sell insurance. Coming from always just being in these fast-paced environments to, so it was like Bob Parr in that movie, The Incredibles, is how I felt. Life wasting away behind a desk. But I started like listening to what people were saying, and like people might ask me for advice, like, what are you doing this or that? And I say somebody's in my head. Several people asked me like, dude, are you writing a book? And I started getting asked to speak. And that's when I realized like, okay, we need to redefine purpose here and see what this journey is. And that's when I decided to do what I'm doing now, take it speaking full time and motivating people. And I truly believe that is what my purpose is. It was that way when I was in the military, even as an enlisted soldier, motivating people has always been my thing. It just took me a while to figure it out. and how to monetize it, right? Outside of the military. And I truly believe that that's my purpose. And so with that redefined purpose, I could pull out of a gas station, get hit by a Mack truck and not be able to walk tomorrow, but my purpose would still be the same.
Yeah.
And that's why I love, living up to that standard, because I feel that I'm already resiliently postured, because there are not many things that can take that away from me. So I can always continue to work towards that angle of, helping people see brighter features in themselves and get on the right path.
Yeah. When we talk about your purpose and stuff, do you feel like people who you've known, do you feel like people are able to kind of identify that life's purpose who have gone through some type of traumatic event in their life? More so than if everything had just gone, as is.
I don't think it's that difficult to define your purpose. I think it's more difficult to execute on it when you have not been in have not had a traumatic experience. And the reason is because, I go back to saying after I lost my arm, it was, I didn't have any other choice. I was reinventing myself. When, individuals just think that, okay, I'm not going down the road that I want, I need to make a change. Unless you hit rock bottom, like your true rock bottom, it is much more difficult to transform yourself. And it's going to take that much more discipline to do it. Is that kind of what you're asking there?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
But it's the first step though, is peeling back the onion of what you find is your purpose. Who do you want to be? What tasks are going to help you get there? And what that's going to do is that kind of outlines your journey, but that defines, who you really are. Like, what are you passionate about? Where do you see yourself? Okay, well, let's now figure out how we can get there. And we learn from James Clear in Atomic Habits, like, you are your habits, right? And so our habits are what really define us, and we can change those. We just, we have to find an end state of what are we trying to achieve? Where are we trying to get to? And then don't bite off more than you can chew, and have some grace, man. Be kind to yourself. You're never going to hit the mark every single time. If you miss a day, so what, man? Okay, I didn't get my meditation in this morning. You know what? Just put it in the night. Because my schedule, I try and get mine down to like, okay, 4 a.m. this, 4:08 this, and you try and get detailed. How often are you going to be successful at that? And many people might say you're setting yourself up for failure by being that detailed. Well, I'm just trying to take it to the next level. As long as I don't let it bog me down, I'm not setting myself up for failure, right? So you have to be kind to yourself and know what you're capable of, and set realistic expectations of where you're going on this journey. But that's what I think about purpose, man. If everything you're doing is not taking you somewhere down that road, you're never going to be happy, right? Absolutely. And none of us have ever arrived. As soon as you think you've arrived, somebody's going to knock you off that pedestal. You've never arrived. And that's why we always say that old cliche. It's not about the product. It's about the process. It's the path that you're on. The true road to happiness. It's not something you achieve. It's something that you live.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, before I get to my last question, which is about a big event you got coming up, a big thing that you're raising money for somebody who's heard your story today and they're looking for a motivational speaker, what kind of places do you speak at, and where can they find you?
Yeah. So richingram.com is my website. You can check me out there, all kind of tools, some resources, but there's a contact form there. Love to have a conversation. So generally the types of audiences to whom I speak are either corporations looking for leadership speeches. So I generally do keynote speeches, but motivational leadership, sales motivation is a big one. Nonprofits, helping folks raise money, just because I am a product of nonprofit organizations. my triathlon journey came through Challenge Athletes Foundation, and I wholeheartedly know that without that nonprofit organization, I would not be where I am today. So I know that, good nonprofits have the ability to change lives. I am running Leadville 100. Let's see, what was that, August 17th? And so for that, I'm trying to raise money for this nonprofit called Warriors in Quiet Waters. And this organization, and oftentimes people ask me like, hey, well, we're raising money for veteran organization. Who's the best? Well, these guys are amazing. And they directly align. What they try and do is reintegrate, it's reintegration of soldiers back into society, but using the natural elements. So trout streams and hunting and all these things to build that camaraderie and reintegration. And it's therapeutic, right? And the difference between these guys and other folks is that they have an alumni program where these guys literally have some kind of support network forever, for their life. And that is not common. A lot of other organizations are like, oh, hey, you want to go, we'll fly you out here to do this fly fishing trip. And then you do it, and then it's like, all right, later. So that's one of the biggest things with these guys. But if you go to my website at richingram.com, there's a banner at the top of it. You click that and it'll take you to my fundraising page for these guys. And there's a pretty good explanation in text that tells you why I think it's a great organization, why you should donate to them. And I would appreciate it if you do.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Dude, I will be sure that for anybody interested, I will be sure that all the links and your information and stuff are inside of today's show notes for easy access. The Leadville 100. Talk to me a little bit about that, because I want people to understand that what we're talking about here is absolutely ridiculous.
All right. So let's see. It's a 100-mile race in Leadville, Colorado, which has, I think it's about 18,000 feet of climbing. But, that's not the most difficult part of it. One of the most difficult parts is it starts at 10,000 feet of altitude. And so I'm going out there August 1st, and I'm living in like a little co-op housing. So literally I'm in a room with like 6 other people for 2 weeks, just acclimatizing and getting some good runs in, go out and actually do segments of the course before I move into an actual house for the few days around the race. But yeah, man, it's an iconic 100-miler. It's takes a lot of training, a lot of prep work. Doing those kind of events, again, it's all about the process, man, because you're having to, like tomorrow morning, I'm waking up at 1 a.m. to do a 5.5-hour run. Got to drive to the trail. I need to make sure I eat breakfast. Got to, prep my turnaround spots. And then it's going to be 95 degrees here in Austin, Texas by like 10 a.m. So that's why I wake up that early to get those done. But it takes up so much time that you have to be intentional with everything that you do. Because it's not just a 5.5-hour run, but now I have to make sure that I recover properly and eat well, sleep well. I have 3 kids, I have work, I have clients. So everything that I do now has got to line up. And so I'm just very intentional with everything. But, I do those runs because, again, 1, it is part of my purpose of motivating others, but 2, setting ambitious physical targets and trying to achieve them, it helps me maintain my emotional stability. So I try not to say my purpose is a runner, but just because I'm one jacked up knee away from that not being the case. But I am a physical fitness enthusiast. And I love trying to see what my body can do driving. I love it when my body tells itself, dude, you can't take any more of this. You can't keep going. Give me more. That just means that you're growing. Give me more growth. Make me better. And so, that's why I do these races, man. And they are a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Rich, man, I want to thank you, dude, so much, man, for being here today, just for sharing your story and even more so than your story, honestly, just the insights, the takeaways that you have to offer, man. It's truly amazing. And it's been a real gift getting to talk with you today.
Oh man, I appreciate you having me on, Kevin. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And for you listening today, my hope as always is that you heard something today and probably a lot of things that can be an impact to your life. So take what you heard today and put it into action. Remember, check out those show notes. I'm also going to leave inside of today's show notes a couple of other episodes. If you were digging this one, you're going to be sure to like those as well. So my friend, get out there, take on the day with grit, grace, and inspiration.